All right, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am here. I am ready to break down the title of this podcast, which I think is going to be Why the Nuggets Will Fail in Free Agency and maybe in the trade market, things like that. There's a lot to get into there. This podcast is going up on Wednesday morning. David Adelman is going to have a press conference in the afternoon. I may or may not do some content after that on whether it's Mile High Sports or on the Pickaxe and Roll podcast here at Mile High YouTube. Make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really appreciate it. We'll see what happens and whether I can get to something like that. But first and foremost, I wanted to talk about free agency and trades. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of names right now, but I am going to kind of lay out Denver's situation and some things that I have been thinking about and just a lot of questions that I get from people and a lot of wondering, why can't Denver do this? Why can't Denver do that? What's the problem? Why are you being such a Debbie Downer, Ryan? Things like that. I'm going to lay out the case. I'm going to lay out a previous episode. I was very optimistic. I did my best to bring a better tone. This is the internal development strategy. This was my, I think, belief, or at least my attempt at believing what Denver could do in that regard and trying to figure out exactly how they could become a better team and continue to be championship caliber with the current mix that they have. Hypothetically, let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say I'm giving it too much hopium to the situation and Denver falls into the injury trap. Let's say not everything goes according to plan. Usually things don't during a season. This is my layout. First segment, we're going to talk about the full resource list that Denver has at their disposal this offseason to try to make their team better, as well as the issues that kind of pertain to that. And then the second segment will be sort of, how do you create a valuable offseason for Denver? What can you actually do? And what could Denver explore in trying to make themselves better, especially if things aren't perfect, especially if things aren't ideal and the Nuggets have to pivot? One of the reasons why this came around, I want to start with two graphics here real quick. Let's go to this view. This is Denver's upcoming salary cap sheet that they have. If you're listening to the audio side, sorry, I'll do my best to describe things. Basically, Denver has 13 roster spots that are committed to over the course of the 2025-26 season. If Dario Saric opts into his player option, which is $5.4 million, I don't see why he wouldn't. And Russell Westbrook, who came out earlier today, I'm recording this on Tuesday, that Russell Westbrook had surgery on his hand to try to repair a couple of ligaments in his non-shooting hand. I would expect him to opt in to that player option now as well, just to guarantee. Well, maybe there is an opt-out and he decides, you know what, I'll try to see if I could get a couple extra 100,000 for another minimum contract, things like that. But with the potential issue that comes with, hey, I've got surgery, want to guarantee that I'm getting some cash, unless there's a team that's able to line up a deal with him, I don't think that he's going to get a big raise from Denver. And so they're going to have to kind of navigate that. It's going to be very difficult. So Denver has 13 guys that they are committed to for the 2025-26 season. You can only carry a roster spot full of 15 people. And you get 3 two-way contracts after that. Notice I did not include any of the two-way guys, Trey Alexander, Spencer Jones, PJ Hall, on this particular sheet. But the long and short of it, for people that are watching along right now, Denver does not have a lot of room. They have 4 different guys, mostly 3 right now, that have a whole bunch of money committed to them. And Nikola Jokic, $55 million next year. Jamal Murray, $46.4 million next year. And Michael Porter Jr., $38.3 million next year as well. Aaron Gordon's only got $22.8 million. He's got a great contract, especially for this next season. It'll get more pricey and more expensive in the following years. But for now, I think it's going to be very interesting to see just whether Denver can take advantage of the fact that he took a hometown discount in order to give Denver some flexibility. But beyond that, it's a very cheap roster. The only guys that are kind of making too much money, you could argue, are Zeke Naji and Dario Saric. They are not factors for Denver, but they will be impediments because of where Denver is at. If you pay your top four guys what is effectively a combined $155 million, it's really difficult to do anything else. That's the long and short of it. Like that's actually is it 150? No, it's 160 million. If you pay your top four guys 160 million, it's going to be very, very difficult to have any other flexibility because Denver's committed only about like they've 199.4 million in salary over the course of next season. And so they have problems. And the big reason why they have problems is because the salary cap is 154 million. So they are 45 million over the salary cap. They cannot sign major free agents. And what used to be the case is that if you were within kind of the first apron, you could at least use the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. It was a large number. Even if you were above the first apron, the taxpayer mid-level exception used to be a larger chunk. But because we are in the first apron and second apron era, the ownership groups screwed Denver. They effectively made it impossible for Denver to add to their roster with good players. And so Denver, when they first signed Bruce Brown back in 2022, gave him a contract that was worth $6.4 million. And then the NBA changed the terms of what those mid-level exceptions and taxpayer mid-level exceptions were. And they can't even give this next player that they could sign the same taxpayer mid-level exception is going to be $1 million less, despite the fact that it's 3 years after when they gave Bruce Brown that contract. Keep in mind, they'll probably still give it to Bruce Brown. That's my expectation, is that Bruce Brown is probably going to be a Denver Nugget with that particular exception. If he is not, if they decide to go a different direction, the kinds of players that they are going to be able to get for 5.4, 5.5 in that general range $1 million, it's not a lot. It's just there's not a lot of guys that you're going to get that are impactful enough. And how that really has borne across over the course of these last two seasons is that Denver gave the first one to Reggie Jackson on their own team. It was a horrible deal, horrible decision. It was one of the reasons they did it was because it was promised to him. And ultimately, it didn't work out. The next season, they gave it to Dario Saric. And so, at least with Reggie Jackson, he played during the playoffs during the 2024 year. He wasn't great, but he had a moment or two. With Dario, it was just such a fail. And now he's on the hook for another $5.4 million for next season. And I don't know, like Denver could get out of it. There's a couple of different ways that they could. One is to trade him somewhere. One is to buy out his contract. One is to waive and stretch him. That's a different conversation for a different day. But the long and short, and the reason why I wanted this up here for so long was because everybody has this feeling, this assumption that, and like I think there are things that I would have done differently than Calvin Booth, of course. I thought that he did a pretty bad job in terms of managing Denver's assets. But I also kind of understand why he struggled. Denver was in a really tough position to begin with, and unfortunately, Calvin Booth's decisions made that worse. Some of the guys that he picked, some of the decisions that he made things more challenging for himself rather than easier. But now I look at the situation that the Nuggets are in. I'm looking at what they have to work with and am mostly at a loss for words in terms of what they can do to make their team better, if not through internal development. Now, one of the biggest reasons why that is because of this graph. This comes from uh, Owen Phillips, who does a Substack that's very data centric, that does a lot of good visualizations. But the idea was originally from Tom Haberstroh. It is a visualization of the number of all NBA, all star, and all defense teammates that an MVP has played with during the first 10 seasons of their career. And so, MVPs, of course, there haven't been that many throughout history, but there have been enough that you can look at guys like Magic Johnson, who's had over 30 in the first 10 seasons. He's played with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, guys like stars. Larry Bird has played with stars. Steph Curry, of course, has played with stars. Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, Shaq, Russell Westbrook, even LeBron James and Michael Jordan. Not nearly as many as some of those other guys, but certainly enough. And then you get all the way down to Nikola Jokic, who has never once in the first 10 seasons of his career played with an all-star, an all-NBA, or an all-defense player. And it's a little bit misleading, and I'll tell you why. Because Jamal Murray has stepped up in the playoffs on multiple occasions and become an all-star, all-NBA caliber playoff performer at times. Now, it's not consistent enough. He's done it 2 out of the last 5 seasons. So he signed a 5-year max contract with the Nuggets and then signed this 4-year max contract extension that I'll get to in a little bit. But during those 5 years, he had 2 great playoff years, 1 fine playoff year this season, 1 bad playoff year in 2024. And then he was hurt for another 2. Actually, the bubble year, he was still under his rookie contract. So that one can't even count. So he's had 1 great year. He's had 1 bad year. He's had 1 good year. I think this year counts as good. And then 2 injury missed years. Michael Porter Jr. never really developed into an all-star. There's a reason for that. I think Michael Malone is actually a big reason why he never did, but also because Michael Porter, just the injuries, I think, had to reshape who he was in the NBA. Aaron Gordon, somebody they traded for, never really was close to an all-star in the Eastern Conference, was very close back in 2023 to making it for Denver. It was either him or Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson ultimately got the nod. But outside of those 3 guys, the only other players that I think you could say were ever close were maybe like Gallinari back in 2017. And that's it. Like there's nobody else that I think you could really say justified anywhere close to being an all-star. And the fact that Denver's never had an all-defense guy during this entire stretch, I think is also problematic. Denver's had a whole bunch of guys that are offensive-centric. They have brought in role players to try to fill in the gaps. But for the most part, they've never had a guy who could fundamentally change the defense next to Jokic. Some of that is to do with Jokic, his weaknesses, his overall involvement in everything because the opposing team wants to involve him in everything. Other guys can't be involved in everything because they're just not out there enough or not involved enough. But Denver needs to change this. First 10 seasons of an MVP's career, Jokic is the only player, the only MVP that has never once had an all-star, all-NBA, or all-defense guy. And so when you're talking about a talent deficit, that is one of the things that you talk about. You talk about how much guys make in comparison to other players and why Denver is paying Jamal Murray as much as they are. He's just signed a 4-year, $208 million extension. It's a lot. Michael Porter Jr., towards the tail end of a rookie extension that was very pricey, but like he hasn't manifested into the talent that Denver needed him to be. Aaron Gordon, I think, has done exactly what Denver asked him to do, but they never asked him to be an all-star. They asked him to buy into his role, and he's done that. And now he's being paid like the elite role player that he is. He's not being paid like an all-star. But what I will say is that while Denver has so much money tied up in Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., those guys need to be great. It just has to happen because there is no way the Nuggets will ever generate enough value from the rest of their roster. Jokic can do whatever he wants. Like he already has. He's been the best player in the world for 5 years. Nobody in the world can account for the fact if Murray is not going to be all-star caliber in the playoffs, if Porter's not going to be an elite starter, like kind of in the top 10 at their position kind of mold, if they're not going to be at that level, it's just impossible for Denver to make things happen anymore because they lost KCP and didn't really replace him talent-wise. They lost Bruce Brown, never really replaced him talent-wise. And Denver's just up a creek at this point. They've got, I would say, Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Russell Westbrook, Julian Strawther, all outperforming their contract value per number, like per dollar. Aaron Gordon, I think he's outperforming his contract value. Nikola Jokic might even be outperforming his contract value. But in the modern NBA, the second apron era, where you need everybody to be in lockstep, where you need everything on board, and everything has to be valuable, Murray's contract and Porter's contract are almost debilitating unless they rise to the level. And so I'm very curious to see how Denver handles this, whoever the new general manager is, whoever, like what David Adelman ultimately does with those guys. Can he help turn Jamal Murray into an all-star? Can he help get the best out of Michael Porter Jr.? Kind of felt like they got the best out of Michael Porter Jr., and I'm not sure we're ever going to see a better version of Jamal Murray. We might not. Who knows? But I think Denver's at a very, very dangerous place financially and with their cap sheet that they now have to get creative, and there's not a lot of assets that they have left to get creative with. When we come back, we're going to chat about that list of assets, what Denver can do, what they have at their disposal, and then how they can create this ever so valuable offseason. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll. Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. Let's go over the asset list really quick. It's very short. It is very short. Denver, during this draft, the 2025 draft, will have access to one first-round pick that they can trade. That is the 2031 first-round pick. They will have access to 0 second-round picks that they can trade. That is because over the course of the last calendar year, they gave up 6 second-round picks, 3 to move up and select Deron Holmes, 3 to get off of Reggie Jackson's salary. I'm going to criticize it every time it comes up. It is horrible, just a despicable deal. And the fact that Denver made it has actually really set them back. And if they had just had Reggie Jackson's salary, they could have traded for Jonas Valanciunas or Larry Nance Jr. or somebody to be a better backup center. I digress. So Denver doesn't have any second round picks that they can trade. They have one first round pick they can trade. They have to unprotect every other pick in 2027, in 2029. I think if the right deal came along, they would do that. But I got to be honest, I'm not sure if there's a great situation for Denver to actually generate the deal that you're talking about. Maybe there's a couple of names that I can throw out there in the future, but I've done some of this on socials if you want to ping me there. But there will be plenty of time to talk specific names. This is not what this is about. Once the draft is over, 2025 draft, Denver will gain access to trading their. Actually, they can't trade their 2026 first round pick until draft night, but they will have access to trade their 2032 first and second round picks. The problem is the Stepien rule. So if Denver trades 2031, they obviously can't trade 2032. If they trade 2032, they obviously can't trade 2031. So Denver can only still trade one first round pick until the draft in 2026, which is over a year from now. Kind of think that if Denver is stuck right now, if there's actually nothing that they can do, a 2026 draft day trade that includes the expiring contract of Michael Porter Jr. for $40 million, as well as a 2026 first rounder and a 2031 first round pick, it's a pretty valuable deal for the right situation. Think about it from like Indiana, for example. Remember when they traded Bruce Brown and three first round picks for Pascal Siakam? Think about it like that. Like that might be the right time to do it, and you might have to bite the bullet right now in order to make a deal like that happen. But I digress. So that's the list of assets that they have. They don't have a whole bunch of extra draft capital. They've sold off everything else. This last trade deadline, they tried to float out the idea of different swaps where, hey, you want to swap 2030 second round picks? You want to swap 2031 first round picks? You want to swap in 2026 or 2020, something like that? The answer in most of those cases was no. Most teams just thought that purely getting second rounders, maybe even a first round pick from a team, was more valuable than the idea of a swap with Denver. The longer out that Denver goes, let's say it's 2031, or even let's say it's 2032, they might get more takers for something like that. I remember when Boston traded for Derek White, they traded multiple, was it two first? I think it was one first, but it was a 2028 first round pick swap, top one protected. And as it turns out, based off of Jason Tatum tearing his Achilles and different situations that might force Boston to pivot, maybe that becomes valuable for San Antonio in 2028, 3 years from now, when Victor Wembanyama is an absolute monster. You just don't know in these situations with Boston. So we'll see what happens. But that's really all Denver can do or offer from a trade standpoint. It's why when people ask me, hey, why can't they get involved in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes? Well, maybe they can, but as somebody who's kind of going through a couple of different exercises trying to figure out the right deal, it's very hard to figure out how to give up enough value for Kevin Durant without trading multiple starters and multiple bench players. Oh, and by the way, every asset you have. And then can you field a team even after you do that? The answer may be no. Other details like, could Denver get involved for somebody like Desmond Bane? Could they, like, who's another good name that's out there that might make a degree of sense? I don't know. Like, obviously Giannis, they can't get involved in Giannis because they don't have enough assets to throw out there. If they wanted to trade for Larry Markkinen, like, they can't really do that. Larry Markkinen is way more valuable than anything than Denver can throw Utah's way. Unless they decide they also want to get it on the same sweepstakes that OKC has done and decide, you know what, we would love to give Larry Markkinen for Michael Porter Jr. Julian Strother, a 2031 first round pick, and swaps in 2030 and 2032. Maybe they just make that bet and Denver gets somebody who's made an all-star team. Maybe it could do that again in Denver. I don't know. But the long and short of it is that Denver cannot do that much. There are some minor things that they can do from a free agency standpoint, but again, because they're over the first apron, that's the rule. They only have access to the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is a $5.3, $5.4 million contract offer. And a lot of other teams can just offer more than what Denver can. So a lot of these guys that, like, I'll pull up my free agency list here. Top free agents by position. Like Malik Beasley is the top shooting guard on the market, which is insane, by the way. Cam Thomas, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Ty Jerome, Quentin Grimes. I think all those guys are clearly out of Denver's price range. I think Tim Hardaway Jr., probably out of Denver's price range, even though Denver could have traded for him back during this last offseason and had him under contract. Even guys like Gary Trent Jr., Luke Kennard, Keon Ellis is a team option. A guy who I would keep my eye on, Karis LeVert. Does he get the money that he wants from Atlanta? Would he rather play for a contender? Could Karis LeVert come play a bench scoring role for a team like the Nuggets for a cheap contract? He could probably do it for a slightly more expensive contract with another contender, which is why Denver runs into this problem in the first place. So that's the problem that Denver has. And it's why, as the title says, I think Denver will fail in free agency and trade talks this particular season. And it sucks. Like, I think that is an unfortunate reality for Denver. But it's also why the Nuggets front office, ownership, vice chairman, Josh Kroenke of KSE, has really started putting forth this idea of internal development. And I'm calling cap because I do not think that Denver would be discussing internal development with this group if they had assets that they could throw out there. I think Josh Kroenke looks at the situation, understands that it's going to be very hard for Denver to trade guys like Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. for value. I think it's going to be hard for them to combine Dario Saric and Zeke Naji with assets to get a better player because they don't have assets to trade. And I think he's realizing this. And that was one of the reasons why he put out the phrase internal development for Denver, because they can't develop externally. There's no way that they can do it. They don't have a draft pick. They don't have free agency options. They don't have trade options. So what do? Well, you don't lie to people, but you kind of, like any good politician, you finagle the truth a little bit. And you say, yeah, we're going to focus on our internal development. I mean, look at how valuable Christian Braun was. Look at how awesome Peyton Watson is. Julian Strother, guys like that. Look at how much value you can do and get from these guys. We're going to focus on them. And it's not that crazy. As I mentioned in my optimism show on Monday, it's not that crazy for Denver to basically say, yeah, we're going to commit to those guys because we think that they could be valuable. Christian Braun, I think, has a case. He's already earned it. By the way, let me pull up the screenshot here again real quick. The salary cap sheet. Everybody is scared of the $30 million that Christian Braun will be making. The projected salary cap for 2026-27 is $170 million. So as I do the math here really quick, what is 30 divided by 170? 17.6% of the salary cap. Right now, Michael Porter Jr. makes 38, and the salary cap this year will be 154. So he makes 24.6. If Christian Brown is making 17, that's fine. Like it's not that crazy. Um, Emmanuel quickly will make the same amount of money. Jalen Suggs will make maybe slightly more. Those guys are still in the general ballpark of what you're talking about for Christian Brown. So that's not crazy. Now, if Peyton Watson's making 20, if Julian Strother ends up making 15 million, if you have to give the full taxpayer MLE to Russell Westbrook, or else he's going to walk away in free agency and you don't have a way to replace him, then that could also be a problem too. Like you start to get very expensive very quickly. And so you have to find some value somewhere. So we'll see what Christian Brown ultimately makes. I kind of don't think he's going to get that 30 million mark in at least the first year of his deal. So I wouldn't be that like it's not that crazy. But just keep in mind that the number 30 million is not that crazy anymore. It's when you start getting 40 million and 50 million, and guys are now starting to make 60 and maybe even closing in on 70 million that you really start to have an issue. And 30 million is only a problem for Christian Brown if those other numbers are also happening. So that would be, I think, the concern. But yeah, this is the problem. How do you create a valuable offseason for this Nuggets team? How can you possibly do that with what I have just shown? Well, you have to hit on everything, and you have to get creative, and you probably have to make a trade. I am not of the opinion that Denver should run it back. I want to make that perfectly clear. I know there's a lot of people that think I'm caping for the organization when I'm trying to lay out the path, when I'm trying to lay out the vision that they are showing. I'm just trying to show you what they're saying. But I have been pretty negative overall, and I think pretty straightforward that I don't think the plan is going to work. And so if they run back the same plan, yeah, there's a marginal benefit I think that you could get from David Adelman being the guy that helps you. Like it can help the young guys especially. But is it going to help Jamal Murray become the best version of himself? Probably not. It's going to help Michael Porter. I don't know. Aaron Gordon, we'll see. Nikola Jokic, I don't think he's going to be super enthused if Denver brings back basically the exact same group. I don't think he will be. So I think you got to bring back somebody different, something different. So can you get a new seventh man or eighth man in a trade? If you don't believe in Peyton Watson, and I know that a lot of folks are a little bit tepid on him, especially after the playoffs. He only averaged about 14 minutes per game and was shaky. I thought he shot the ball reasonably well from the outside, but when they asked him to do anything more, he kind of turtled a little bit. And I think that there's still some development that needs to happen there. If you believe that you need to upgrade on him, a deal that I've thrown out is the idea of Chicago moving Ayo Dosunmu for Peyton Watson and Dario Saric. They get another cheap option for Peyton Watson. He's at a better position for them. They've got a whole bunch of guards and Kobe White and Josh Giddey and some other guys that they've got going on. They commit to those different players and they get a flyer at a different position. And the Nuggets get a guard that they can trust to defend, play make, shoot off the ball, things like that. For shorter team control, but then that's why the Bulls might do that. So could you justify making Ayo Dosunmu maybe your sixth man? Maybe he replaces Russell Westbrook. Maybe you just add him to the mix and he's with Russell Westbrook. Can you add somebody in free agency with the taxpayer MLE? Let's say it's actually, let me just go to my list real quick. Say it's Taurean Prince. Can you get Taurean Prince for the taxpayer MLE? Probably. I don't see why not. He gets to play next to Jokic, gets to play next to Murray. He's a good replacement in certain lineups for Michael Porter Jr., things like that. Okay, so you've got your same core five. You've got Taurean Prince, you've got Ayo Dosunmu, and you didn't even give up a first-round pick. You're holding on to that bad boy for dear life. You've got Deron Holmes coming back. Let's say you add a veteran kind of minimum contract backup center as somebody that you can add to that mix. And then that's your team. You've got, let's say Russell Westbrook also comes back. So you've got Russell Westbrook, you've got Ayo Dosunmu, you've got Julian Strawther, you've got Taurean Prince, you've got Deron Holmes, you've got some other minimum contract backup center. That team's marginally better. Is it that much better? Maybe, maybe not. But could somebody like Ayo Dosunmu be your Bruce Brown for this year? Of course. Absolutely. So that's the way that you got to be thinking. Now, if you believe in Peyton Watson, and you don't want to give up on him, and you'd rather trade somebody else, maybe you trade Julian Strawther, maybe you could trade Christian Brown and go try to get another starter back. That deal is harder to do because of the money, because Christian only makes about $4.9 million next year. So finding a matching salary value for somebody like that, really, really difficult, especially like somebody that's actually good that other teams are willing to part with. So I don't necessarily think that that's likely. Also, I think Christian's earned the right to be a Nugget on his next contract. So we'll see what happens there. But it's why those options are so limited. You're either like trading Peyton Watson or Julian Strawther or somebody like that, along with maybe your 2031 first-round pick if you really want to get valuable, or you're trying to get some upgrade at sixth or seventh man, maybe getting somebody as an eighth man for your taxpayer MLE, and that's about all you got. So that I think would be a pretty good offseason if Denver was to do that, to maybe upgrade those fringe positions and then try to get some, like, you got to hit on a minimum contract guy. You've got to hit on maybe a college free agent, somebody that you add as a two-way contract. Maybe they try to manipulate their way to Denver, say, we don't want to be drafted. We'd rather just go to your organization. But you have to find the right guy to do that. And I just don't think that Denver's in a good position to make that happen. But who knows? Maybe that's a way to do it. That would be a fine offseason. Would it be perfect? No. Can Denver win a championship with that? Yes. Are their odds good? No. Would their odds get better if you trade Jamal Murray or Michael Porter? That is up for debate. So this is why I think when Denver, I said it a little bit earlier, this is why when Denver hits the offseason and starts making moves in free agency, and everybody starts to wonder, why aren't they doing anything? What are they doing? Are they just not going to do anything? This is why. It's because they don't have the flexibility that people are looking for. And maybe they can generate it, but the only way to do so, and I repeat, the only way to do so is to make a trade for one of Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. Trading Zeke Naji is fine. That's not real flexibility. He's making $7.5 million next year. It's not that crazy. Maybe he even plays a role for the team next season. Who knows? Like, maybe he's better than Deron Holmes next year. There's at least a world where that's true. But if you are the Nuggets, the only way to generate actual change would be to break up your core four. Straight up. That's as simple as it is. And so if Denver's willing to do that, then maybe we'll see some creativity here. They're probably not going to have a lot of suitors. That's what I'll say. But who knows? Maybe the right deal comes along and you're surprised and Denver gets a little bit better. And I can talk about some of those teams. I'll talk about specific suitors for Jamal Murray or Michael Porter in a future episode. But right now, I just wanted to lay out the problems. It's why internal development is such a big deal. It's why they are focused on it, because they don't have an alternative. They can't do anything else. If they do, they'll just be lying to themselves unless they're willing to kind of make a trade that does not benefit them for this season. So we'll talk about that in a future episode. But for now, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out. Would really, really appreciate it. Next episode will be on Friday morning as I react to what David Adelman says on Wednesday and just anything else that potentially pops up. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one. We'll talk to you guys very soon.